All right, everybody, welcome to the workshop for today. We'll get started here just in a minute. We've got the session recording in case we need any folks to jump in later and check it out. But we're today talking about expertise and how the expert teacher is, in fact, the agile teacher, the one that can shift and move at any moment, ready to tackle any odd thing that pops up, any kind of calamity that comes our way. So we're going to start out with an example. Let's take a look at a moment in the life of a higher ed instructor. Okay, you guys ready? Here we go. And by the way, this is all I could fit on the one screen. Yeah, there's way more. And this is why it's so hard to teach well and to become that expert we want to be. Obviously, there's more than this. We could get to Peck Hall and somehow the door doesn't open. Somehow we have the projector screen that won't turn on. Actually, the Wi-Fi is great, but the computer won't turn on. And we're wondering, how do we fix this? How do we get through this scrambling nature? And the expert is able to pull it off and make it look good, even when it should look ugly. So we know that we're overwhelmed in teaching because there's so many things happening at once. But the signature of the expert is the agility to move back and forth between these things, actually balance these spinning plates all at once. And we're going to show you how to get there today. So here's our roadmap. Welcome, background, the big idea, and then what makes an expert, exactly what does the research say, and then how do we become that agile expert. You're going to get two strategies you're going to fuse together to make it happen for yourself. And then lastly, we've got a block of time at the end where we can ask questions, ask anything. Please ask anything you want at any time, but we do have time reserved at the end to make sure that your questions get answered, okay? So let's dive in. So one of the biggest research pieces we have comes from Anders Ericsson. He spent his entire career working on expertise theory, and then he rolled it all into this best-selling book, 2016, called Peak. And we get a dive into some of the most amazing athletes, musicians, successful folks in different fields. The catch is, though, that a great deal of the research on expertise is actually done in what we call kind environments versus wicked environments. Kind environments have rules that are there to depend on every time. For example, chess masters or tennis champions. The net's always going to be there. There's always going to be this particular court. There's always going to be that many chess pieces. However, he even tells you in the book, oh, teaching, expertise in teaching, good luck.
Hi.
Because it's a wicked environment.
Mobile order for Christopher Toddy, please.
You're all set.
Wicked environment. And how about the agile teacher right now? Yeah. So what is a wicked environment? Well, that's what we're going to get to here just in a few minutes. But Peak is one of the best reads you could jump into right now on expertise. And wicked and kind is one of the major takeaways we want to talk about, because teaching is a wicked environment where every class period, every day could be completely different. And that's why we get so frustrated that first period went so well, next we switch over, and then the very same lesson tanks. And so the agile teacher must shift and move inside that wicked environment. And so here's my biggest slogan I like to use for teaching. Well, what works when? It all depends. It's very hard to boil it down to things that work every single time, all the time. The expert, on the other hand, has the tools and knows how, when, and why to use them. That's the signature of the expert teacher. They have an array of strategies and tools, but they also have the skill to deploy those at the right moment, at the right time, for the right set of students. Let's do an example. So we've got the John Hattie book that's come out the last year, 10 Mind Frames for Visible Learning. He says expert teachers have answers to not only the question of what they are doing, but also to the question of how and why they are doing what they're doing. There's always a rationale behind it. And our example is taking a look at calling on students. In this moment, should I cold call? Should I sweep the room? Should I turn and talk? Should I have a moment of meditation and then they share? Should we retrieve and share, where they write down what they remembered, then they share it? Should we do Poll Anywhere, which is just something we jump up onto the screen or into the chat box if you're teaching online? Or maybe it's somehow some kind of fusion of these. So we have to think about all the tools that we have in our toolbox, and then we have to think about how to deploy the right one at the right time. And it's a very hard call, very hard call. That's why this thing called teaching is so tough to do and to do it well, and to do it well every day. Here's our second example. In our doctoral program over here in the College of Ed, we use this tool called 6-word book summaries, where we take doctoral students, we ask them, hey, remember that book you read 2 semesters ago? Yeah, give it to me again, but use 6 words. So one book we like to use is called Understanding by Design by Wiggins and McTighe. And those are the 6 words that a student used to summarize the entire book. Now that's pretty cool. That's a major retrieval mechanism. However, the expert teacher would know that sometimes it's not a 6-word book summary. It's a 6-word story summary, 6-word chapter summary, unit, project. But then what do I do with it? Well, the expert knows how to make the right call. Well, you're going to pair up now and you're going to share what you wrote in your 6 words. And in fact, after that, you're going to square up into a team of 4. Then you're going to share the 4. Or I don't want to do those things. That would actually not work today. In fact, I'm going to go to cold call, or I'm going to go to the sweep. So the teacher with that expertise has the ability to make that right call more often. That's the differentiator between the novice and the expert. And so Keith Sawyer wrote this great book about improvisational teaching. Yeah, exactly. Almost like sketch comedy teams or theater actors using those kind of improvisational skills to become the best teacher we can be. And he says it's odd because expert teachers do 2 apparently contradictory things. They use more structures and yet they improvise more. So they're more prepared, and yet they're more prepared to also throw out that plan. Isn't that interesting? That sort of paradoxical statement there. So what are the major takeaways from the expertise world? Here they are. The expert can play jazz. That is the difference maker. The expert can play jazz. That improvisational nature that you see in the boxing ring or onto the musical stage. Here are 2 examples. Ali was so good, he didn't have to think about boxing. He would actually insult your mama while he was beating you down. That's how good he was. So he's not even worried about the craft or the sweet science while he's doing it. That's how good he was. Stevie Ray Vaughan, for example, there's a viral video on YouTube you can watch. Just type in Stevie Ray Vaughan breaks a string.
Just in case you need them. I get them. I got a pack of them from Mark.
Stevie Ray Vaughan breaks a string, and he actually loses a guitar string and doesn't miss a singular note. He just plays around it. Now, I've talked to my own friends who are professional musicians. They're like, bro, I don't know about that. I think I wouldn't last too long. And that's when the expert really shines, is when things go badly, things go wrong. They're able to adapt and play jazz in the moment. And secondarily, the expert plainly just calls better plays because they have what's called the eye. If you think about a professional baseball player, they have a fraction of a fraction of a fraction to read a pitch and decide if they're going to swing. But the expert can see it before it comes. That's when we see a demarcation of the expert teacher. We can see it before it even gets there, and we can make our call on how to extinguish that little fire or to capitalize on a learning moment. And so we have the Cambridge Handbook of Expertise, which specifically does talk about teaching expertise. So Anders Ericsson at Peak says, look, I don't even want to go there for teaching. It's too wicked. Well, they actually decided to write a chapter on it, and they have mentioned that perhaps even more important is the contextual nature of teaching. A move that might be best in one situation might be precisely the wrong move to make in a different situation. So as soon as we got our class figured out, the very next class, it actually is the wrong call. It's only 15 minutes apart, and we get so frustrated. But the expert teacher knows to make that shift before it even happens. And further, Stigler and Miller say that this analysis leads us to reject the idea that expertise in teaching can be defined in terms of decontextualized best practices. So there really is no recipe. It's more of a gumbo, if you will. A dash of this and a pinch of that. In fact, with our doctoral students, we actually make them read both these books side by side. One book offers a checklist for you to be outstanding in the classroom, and the other says it's a little different. It's a little different depending on the time of day, the type of student, and it may end up being more like that mixture of ingredients. So it's very disorienting to read these books side by side in our program. All right, so there's your big ideas. Now, here are the keys to the whole workshop right here. Two things. If we would take deliberate practice, which is the gold standard of getting better, that's what Anders Ericsson teaches us, and we would combine that with reflective practice, we will get the agile expert. That's it right there. There's the whole workshop on one slide. So we'll dig into each one, then we'll have a chance for Q&A at the end, but let's pause for any questions so far, any comments you want to make, jump on the mic or something in the chat box. If not, we'll just jump right into deliberate practice. All right, so let's go to deliberate practice. This is some mind-blowing stuff. It's so simple and yet life-changing. This is the gold standard of getting better at anything in your life. A book group using the Ericsson book from the chat from Vicky, thank you. It would be a great read. It's so cool because it goes into so many other domains except for teaching. And then we're thinking, oh, what can I steal though? What can I steal? But I love the willful acknowledgement from Ericsson that teaching may be one of the most wicked environments out there, along with basically what fighter pilots go through and crisis, first responder type folks. It's really crazy how there are no rules really, and you're always teaching on shifting sand. It seems. So let's get into the deliberate practice. So here we're going to define it. You're going to get the key of the entire Ericsson book in one slide right here. We're going to define deliberate practice. He calls it the gold standard of getting better. So the first thing you have is focused, goal-oriented practice versus just mindless practice. We're just going to go, yeah, I'm going to go in, I'm going to work out today. Well, what exactly are you working on? So it's got to be focused, goal-oriented. And next, that goal has to be just out of reach so you can chase that goal over time, because you have to acknowledge that it's going to take time to get better and then to get really, really good and become an expert. Finally, we're going to track that progress through ever-increasing levels of complexity. And the thing you have to have, which is really tough for us in higher ed, is a coach to walk alongside to provide the crucial feedback needed to help us keep leveling up. Now, that's the one thing we may be missing in higher ed, is a trusted coach to help us, almost like a personal trainer. That's what we need. This is the recipe for you getting better, and you're getting better faster, running that race toward mastery, becoming the expert. That's the entire book of Peak, basically on that slide right there. This is how the experts in world-class symphonies get to be first chair or grandmasters on the chess team. Okay. We're actually going to set our own goal here next. I'm going to run you through a deliberate practice goal setting exercise next. Okay. So if you would, just kind of get you something to write on, whether it's just a notepad, you've got a second screen, whatever. We're going to actually set our goal, and I'm going to run it through a system of deliberate practice for you. And then we'll discuss, if you've got one you want to share, that'd be awesome. But I've got an example for you. Okay. So deliberate practice and personal training. Here we go. So our first step, just write down number one. Okay. Don't copy this sentence down, but just write down one. We're going to identify a skill to strengthen, a skill currently just out of reach. Okay, here's my example for you. The skill would be move more intentionally in order to interact with more students more often. So a lot of our undergrads really have trouble. They stay at the front of the room and they stay at one spot in the front of the room. So we're going to intentionally learn how to practice that. The catch with teaching is that we never get to practice. We're always performing. So if you go out into the ball field, there's all kinds of time to practice, make errors, readjust, scrimmage, and then go and do stronger, better, faster the next time. With teaching, we're always teaching. We're not practicing. So it's very, very tough for us to pull this off, but I do have a solution for you. All right, here's our next step. Determine how you will practice the skill. And how would we do it for this example? We're going to do what's called hitting your mark. What I do for students, actually, I tape painter's tape, and I tape little X's in random places around the room. And when they teach, they have to hit their mark. This is actually a theater exercise for getting people to feel more comfortable getting around the stage. And so students can just look at the mark while they're teaching and actively go to it and stand there for a moment and then start teaching again. And what we're finding is that it breaks down that anxiety, and all of a sudden students are now interacting with their teacher more, especially those over in a certain corner that they couldn't quite reach before. So what's our next step? determine then how you're going to practice, but also how you're going to track your progress. Okay, this is very, very specific goal-oriented practice. So how would I do this for this example? Over a 2-week period teaching, I'm going to keep a record of how well I hit my mark. I could do that on a clipboard, or if I'm so bold, I would actually video me moving or not moving to my mark. That's going to be such a crucial thing to get you to your next level of expertise, is actually watching yourself teach. It is so uncomfortable and so awkward. Your voice is sounding weird, and your outfit's weird or whatever, but you have to confront the game film and then take a look. And your final strategy is to start itemizing that out. In week 1, I'm going to hit my mark 3 times each class period. That's the goal. Notice how specific that is. It isn't just, I'm going to be a better teacher today. No. Very, very specific, super specific. And then the second week, I'm going to hit my mark 5 times. So I'm showing myself how I'm going to grow to that new skill. And then finally, we'll get with our coach. But I want you to do is sketch you out a little training regimen here. Just real quick. It's not a dissertation. I'm just saying my skill is questioning. How I'm going to practice, I'm going to do it this way. So go down 1, 2, and 3 for yourself, just real quick. And I would love to hear some shares. Right. So maybe still jotting some things down, but I would love to hear just a sharing now at this point of the thing we picked, right? The thing that we're like, I just want to get a little bit, it's just out of reach. What would that be? So I picked this one here as an example of moving around the room, facilitating a little more. If you guys would jump in, chat, or on your mic, what did you pick as something you wanted to do some deliberate practice on?
I don't mind starting, I guess.
Yeah.
I teach in the graduate program, and I feel like when I go into class, there's so much that I need. I feel like I need to get across, get done. The classes are very content heavy and very specific to skills that they'll take into their professional worlds. So my issue is slowing down my content delivery some and offering up my own self a chance to breathe and to pause. So I said, slow down content delivery a little bit. Because I feel like sometimes I'm just running on sentences, trying to get stuff out there. Although I do try to use backwards design too. But sometimes I can tell they haven't prepared for what we're about to do. And so it's just this almost backtracking. So I said, maybe timing, using a timer to, no matter kind of where I'm at, to just stop a minute, using some breathing, reminding myself maybe 3 times during class or 5 times to stop, breathe, count to 10 type thing, which I know sounds silly and really basic, or just having and I haven't thought of what it might be, a standard question that I throw out in between sort of topics or at break points that will stop me, but then also open up more. And I do a lot of discussion in class. It's not that, but I feel like for me, I'm talking pretty fast and I'm getting a lot out there, and I don't know how much they're absorbing. So, and then with regard to tracking it, that would be pretty easy. I could probably do a mental count of the number of times I pause and breathe, or the number of times I use this, for lack of a better term, bridge question, and then seeing hopefully an increase in student responses versus me feeling compelled to just deliver. That was mine. Sorry.
That's outstanding. I mean, you just did the exact recipe for deliberate practice, and if you would just go do it, you're going to see yourself get better. That's how you do it. Now, if we say we're just going to, well, you know what, I'm just going to slow down. I'm going to start slowing down. Well, that's a good intention, but this recipe here will get you actual quantified and sort of time stamped, in certain cases, moments where you did slow down for students and for yourself. So that's a great example. We have a second and third example in the chat. Someone said encouraging quieter students to speak more in class. So that is a goal that you want. It's just out of reach. And now all we need to do from Ashley is say, okay, what am I going to do to practice that, to get better at it? Well, each time in class, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this twice per class. And then now I'm tracking my progress and I'm keeping the record of it. Sarah says, writing out or mapping information on whiteboards helps me slow down, provide a visual learning tool to go along. And that's something that helps us all, but I think that's back to Vicky's comment there, her plan. Yeah. Okay, so Ashley's got to practice again. Let's see. This time it says planned mini presentations. Maybe I want to start cold calling, encouraging everyone to speak. Absolutely. All we have to do is start planning for action and then how we're going to track it, right? So she says, maybe we track it over 2 weeks. I keep a checklist of who's participated, who hasn't. Exactly. And then you reflect on it. Guess where we're going next? The reflection part. That's the second part. If we do our deliberate practice, and guess what? We take a time to reflect and debrief with a trusted coach, we're going to get farther, faster. Okay. So this recipe right here, you can use it time and again. You want to get better at engaging students. You want to get better at time management for your Tuesday, Thursday classes, as opposed to your Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which you feel like you've got them on lock. But something about Tuesday, Thursday, the 85 minutes is just messing with you a little bit. How about this? I want to work on closure. I want to work on closing out a class more effectively. You can do all that if you do this 3-step recipe for deliberate practice. Otherwise, we're just making the same errors again and again without really learning from them and getting better, faster, stronger. And that's really where our second and final part of the presentation comes in, which is reflection. But key is here, reflecting with a coach to help you make sense of it. Okay, but let's start with reflection first and why it's so important to us. Okay, reflect with a coach. So we have our deliberate practice plus reflective practice. That's going to give us the agile expert we want to be. So let's go into reflective practice. So I take this very seriously. You can see that my life history is sort of in this stack of notepads for my teaching career. And yeah, that goes back to January 09. Yeah, that's me reflecting on these notepads of an IEP meeting. I was at a high school in local Rutherford County, trying to make sure I'm doing the best I can every day. Okay. So reflection is a very big part of my philosophy, but it also is bigger than philosophy. It works. You want to be effective, be reflective, right? And so here's our 3 questions we ask to get better. It comes from a book called Make It Stick, which has been an LTITC favorite over the last 5 or 6 years. And there are really 3 questions that everyone needs to ask if they want to get better at anything. And so for us with teaching, we want to do these 3 questions often. So what went well? Oh, what a no-brainer, right? Some of this stuff I'm showing you today is so simple. You're like, wow, this is really frustratingly simple. Here's your next question. What could have gone better? Those are your bread and butter right there. There's only one more too. And this is the one that people often forget. So identify how you just nailed it. Secondly, say, this could have gone a little bit better. And then finally, your reflection recipe will end with, what might I need to learn or practice to do better next time? That's the one we often forget about. And that's where your deliberate practice and reflection will actually fuse together. You're going to be tracking it, so you'll know exactly what you need to keep practicing and learning for next time. That's it. That's the 3-step reflection recipe. It's going to get you to be better. And by the way, better at pretty much anything you're trying to do. But for our classroom expertise, it absolutely works. So we're going to give you a few more strategies for reflection. Here's how I actually reflect myself. So I went out and gave a professional development over at Riverdale, and I'm finding that my reflection really is there's a pattern, especially once you get down here to the bottom. Oh, here we go. Oh, there's too much stuff. I'm covering too much content. Right, Vicki? Yep. I need to cut the stuff. And now I know. And now I know that 45 minutes, I did it 3 times back to back to back. And every single time I could not finish my lesson, my PD. I now know that because I'm reflecting in the moment, and I will never make that mistake again. That's how reflection puts you to action, okay? And this is the deeper reflection exercise you can do maybe mid-semester or perhaps at the end of each semester, what we call it keep, tweak, and toss. Man, this is a good one right here. This is gold, okay? So you build this little chart here for yourself, and you're actually curating your own curriculum, your own lesson plans, your own unit plans and approaches. We have to identify what we need to keep because it works. What is almost working, maybe a slight adjustment, we're going to tweak it. And in some things, we have to just let it go. It's going to be banished from my repertoire, okay? And when we do this with teachers, we find that they fill up pretty much every category. You can see here that this teacher says, look, my cause and effect essay, that one works. It works. I'm going to keep it. We also have somebody say, look, my butterfly unit, it's close, but it's just there's a little bit too much playing versus learning. Okay, this was an elementary teacher. And then finally, we have another example of someone who says, look, we're going to throw out Pi Day. All it is candy. We're wasting very precious time. It's a cute thing, but it's not a fun thing that also makes people learn, right? So it needs to have both. It's got to be engaging and it's got to be something that helps learning. So this is something you can do with a team, with your whole department. Do this regimentedly through right before each break in each term, right? At December, let's get together as a department. Let's all create these big giant charts. Let's come together to hone our craft. So this is a very deep reflection exercise as opposed to some of the quicker in the moment exercises. What we really want to do here is go back to how we can fuse the deliberate practice with the reflective practice. So Stigler and Miller's book chapter here from the Handbook of Expertise, they actually directly talk about how hard this is to do in teaching, but they give you what they think is the solution. So if you remember Anders Ericsson in Peak, he says, look, with a wicked environment, it's hard to practice with deliberate practice because the game changes every day. And secondly, with teaching specifically, we're never practicing because we're always teaching. But they have in this book chapter here a way to go forward and get that gold standard of getting better. And here it is. It's called lesson study, or specifically Japanese lesson study. This is what I would dream to be happening across the campus, but the logistics of it are very, very tough. Okay, let's talk about what it is first, then I'll show you how it's done. That'll be the last thing we talk about. So lesson study appears to be aligned almost perfectly with the requirements for deliberate practice. I mean, it is a 1-for-1 match, they say, to get Anders Ericsson's expertise career and the results to happen in our field. It has the potential to greatly accelerate the development of expertise in teaching, as well as the system of teaching itself. We have all that you want to know about it here coming up next. It's outstanding. But I do want to engage with you on how this may not be so easy to pull off in our setting at the higher ed level, okay? So here's the lesson study cycle. It begins by you actually teaming up with someone who teaches the same thing that you teach, okay? And you actually team up to establish a learning goal for a lesson. So I'm thinking about people who teach the same section of a baseline chemistry, okay? How about US History 1? We know there are multiple instructors who teach those across the campus. So we would say, how about we get together? We first team up to establish that learning goal. We actually could work as our own deliberate practice coaches here if we team up. The next thing you do, you actually design the lesson as a team. You're going to buddy up. Then one of you, maybe it's a team of 3, but one of you will actually go and teach that lesson that you built as a group, as a team. Next, you will get with that team, whether it's 2 or 3 people, and you're going to reflect on how it went immediately. So in that gap between 9:10 and 10:05 to that next class, we're going to debrief together in that moment. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to recalibrate the lesson in the moment. This is how they teach in Japan. And midday lessons get stronger for kids. And then guess what happens? This kind of cycle just repeats all the time. It's actually a cultural way that they do it. So guess what? In the moment, we reflect and revise. And guess what? The next person jumps in and they teach that same lesson. It's been rebuilt based on the feedback, based on that first trial run. And then we reflect again. Notice how deliberate practice and reflection are kind of uniting here. And then we're going to share those results. And this cycle continues on and on and on. Now, this sounds amazing, right? But what are the challenges that we're going to run into up here, what we do at higher ed? This is built for K-12. It works great. But what about us? Tell us some challenges we might face. We know this works, got the research to prove it, but what about our unique contextual features at the higher ed level?
We teach very different classes. You might have 3 or 4 different preps that are very different scenarios, and you can't build that cadre of individuals all teaching the same, or you'd have 4 different cadres. I mean, I would see that in my situation.
Absolutely. So not everybody's teaching the exact same thing. We have a few crossover chances with some major gen ed courses, right? But a lot of times we're in special topics seminars, subtopics inside of chemistry or sciences. So that does create a challenge for lesson study. Okay, so we need to acknowledge that, right? What else do we see as a blockade to lesson study?
But you could still work with that, just pick one of those and rock and roll,
Yes.
I mean, it's not definitely doable. I have colleagues in math that have implemented this, and it's magnificent.
You learn what we're trying to say here with lesson study is that it's a fast track to mastery, a fast track to expertise. That's what's great about it. How about the spirit of collaboration? Is that always sort of, there? Sadly, maybe not, but that could get in our way. How about just the simple logistics of our timing?
Yeah.
The way that our schedules kind of run, they're kind of inflexible in certain ways. I don't really want to go camp out and observe someone's 6 to 9, Wednesday night class so that I could turn around and do it on a Thursday. That would be very taxing to do, right? But it would be incredible though, especially if we videoed it and we had our goals set for our deliberate practice and we worked on it together. Time is such an enemy for us and in so many ways in what we do here on the higher ed campus. But when we team up like this, we have actually combined the heart of deliberate practice, which creates, grandmasters in chess, but also that reflective piece that gets us the, immediate data we need to make an agile move. Okay, so lesson study, it is how we can parlay all this into our field, I think, but it's really, really tough to pull off. So anything else we can think of, challenges that we see? We've got time is a main concern, and then also consistency of what we do teach. Okay. I will say though, in the spring, I'm actually teaching the identical class in our doctoral program because we have 2 separate cohorts of students taking the class by chance at the same time. So I'll be at Smyrna at the Motlow campus at a satellite group, and then we've got one of our former graduates who's going to teach a group on campus. We're going to plan every single class together, note for note. And we're going to debrief and we're going to do lesson study for the first time at the doctoral level. Now, if I could get me an IRB real quick, boy, would that be cool. But I think I might have run out of time. But this has never happened before. Program has been going on since 2013. This is the first time that the stars have aligned, and I'm very excited to try it out. I want to be better every day. Our next chat here was from Karen. How does background with teaching factor in? Yeah, levels of knowledge, prior experience. That's where that trusted coach comes in. If you've got a department chair that's really willing to get out there and coach you, please, have that, go for it. The LTITC actually offers some of these type of features, but their staff is so limited that they can only do so much. But yeah, you're right. The pairing of folks could be good, could be a challenge. Oh yeah, we can do a follow-up about how it worked out for sure. I would love to talk about that. I'll even bring in Dr. Ben Johnson, who's our student who graduated, who's teaching alongside me now. So, but yeah, actually the pairing up of the team, you may actually have two people actually working on it for lesson study, but then a third person is a coach from the department. That it could work like that too. Their job is to just coach, just to quiz you, coach you. Hey, what about this? Hey, did you think about that? And that kind of relationship building that creates is actually just outstanding. But it depends on your departmental dynamics and those type of things. Okay. All right, so let's do our debrief and then we'll open up for any questions. I've got about 30,000 bonus slides because I don't want to overwhelm anyone. It was so hard to cut it down to make sure you had enough time, but I'll answer any question we have here just in a minute, but we want to debrief. Here are our major takeaways for one slide. This will give you everything you need. So remember that we teach in a wicked environment. Do we agree on that? We're going to be unanimous in that. Yeah, I don't think I can get any pushback on that one. Every day is different. Okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 week, you're nailing it. And then that one class you've got on Tuesday, Thursday, it's just vexing you. And you're wondering, how is this just getting me so bad here? And then the next week, it's like it's the opposite. For me right now, I feel like my weekend courses with the doctoral students is going really well. And in this case, my undergrad class is a little bumpy. And so I feel like I'm pulled in so many directions. We have a wicked environment. That's what we have. We do not have clearly defined rules that are going to be the same every game. And that's something that makes it so difficult to get good at this job. Next, the expert can play jazz. That is the ultimate bar that we cross when we get into expertise. The expert can play jazz with the content and with the way that the curriculum has been scaffolded and with the way we engage with the student. We can actually churn on a dime to capitalize on a moment, to solve a problem, to pivot, to throw out a lesson plan and build one on demand. That is the expert in a nutshell right there. Next, the expert has the eye. They can see it before the pitch even is released. You really read about how professional baseball players hit. They're watching that ball even before it's released. That's how they can zoom in and actually cut the noise from all that they face and zoom in so tightly, almost like tunnel vision in a good way. That's how easily they can see through the lattice work. If you can think about an old porch there at the front of an old farmhouse, the lattice crossover, they can actually see inside those gaps to what is really going on in the classroom. That's what the expert can do because the expert has the eye. They can see through the noise and the clutter and the distraction and see what's really going on at the root cause level. That's how good they are. And it takes a lot of practice to get this done. One of the major takeaways from Anders Ericsson's book is that you could actually do something for decades and not be any good at it because experience doesn't necessarily equal expertise, but deliberate practice, practicing deliberately over 20 years, that's how you get to become an expert, okay? And so our final debrief is here is our solution. Here is our formula for getting this done. If we would combine deliberate practice where we set a specific goal, identify a way to practice that goal, and then track it over time with someone helping us, we pair that with reflecting on that process, we will get better, faster, stronger, and in half the time. And you will be so thankful to yourself that you've stopped making the same errors all over again. Instead, you've made an error and you're learning from it and you're growing new muscles. That's what we do. The expert is always growing new muscles. And that's where we come to our final takeaway, which I held back to the end because it's really, really frustrating, but also pretty cool. Let's take a look at our final takeaway from Dan Pink's Drive. This is an outstanding book on human motivation. But he also says that mastery and reaching out for that new skill is a big part of what keeps us motivated. So oftentimes when we get bored and dejected, it's because we're not being challenged. He reminds us that mastery is an asymptote. What that word means, right, is very strange. It's actually a point on a graph that a line will never reach. Mastery and expertise, you'll never get there, but it's always about the chase. That's what the expert does. They're always chasing the next win, the next victory. That's what's really cool about it. So with that said, we'll take any questions that you have. Now, I hope we give you a great little crash course here in expertise theory and how it does and doesn't work in our field of what we do. Okay, thank you guys. We'll go for questions, takeaways from the crowd. Go ahead, Kim.
So I'm in a department of very creative people. I mean, sometimes the public thinks that scientists are not creative. That's actually not true. It's a very science is a very creative endeavor. And sometimes it's focused. And so suggestions for bringing in faculty that come out of these labs where they've never done any teaching, and yet now they're in a classroom with 200 students just teaching one night a week, doing the 6 to 9 anatomy and physiology, which our A&P classes, there's no prerequisite. It's just, everybody wants to be a doctor, so you could start here. So encouragement, suggestions for them, what would be something, because they're frustrated. Obviously, students are scoring 40s, 30s on their first exam. And, I go in and observe, and I don't want to be hypercritical, but on the other hand, it's like, I didn't know what the hell you said half the time. I've been teaching for 30 years. So suggestions for.
Yeah, I got a bunch of good suggestions for you. First is, if you really want to dive in a little further on how creativity is the bread and butter of the sciences, I do have a book coming out with my boss, Kevin Granville, in March on that very topic. So that's the first cool response there. And secondly, I'm going to give you a slide here that actually I think would be helpful to folks that are just coming to that kind of volume of teaching. And it's from the same people we talked about today, from Stigler and Miller. And they actually boil it down to, if you can work on these 5 things, you're gonna be way better, way faster. Okay, so if you could take those folks who really need to kind of make that big jump, I think if you can get them to focus on just these 5 things, they're going to be great. And if they focus on everything, it will be overwhelming.
Too much, yeah.
It's just too much. And so these 5 things are really great, and I'm going to show it to you right now. So let's do one at a time. So Stigler and Miller, in their book chapter from the Cambridge Handbook on Expertise, they say that expert teachers are not defined by those who employ a set of, quote, best practices, but instead they have the ability to do these 5 things. If you could just get it down to what we call these power standards, I think you're going to feel like you can pull it off, versus there's no way I can learn how to do all this overnight. Okay. So the first thing we need to do, the expert can do this. They actually can assess students' current knowledge, where they are, before and after we teach. That's fundamental. These are like bread and butter. Football coach, come on in, get your fundamentals, boys. Like a big coach, you speak like a big coach that's like all like bow-legged and stuff, like, how y'all doing? That's exactly what we're talking about, is fundamentals. Okay. Secondly, you've got a teacher that can formulate clear learning goals. Again, this is the stuff that guards us against the pitfalls of teaching that we fall into so often. So we only have 5 things we're trying to pull off every day, every class. Next, we have teachers who can actually consider a large number of strategies and routines in their toolbox. So they've got a bunch of stuff, but they can actually consider what to do with it. Okay, that's the next sort of signature strategy of what would become an expert. And next, they need to make good judgments about which strategies we think are most appropriate in that moment. That's the tough part, is 3 and 4. But when we get that kind of practice, the deliberate practice, you can actually get better at that pretty quickly. And then lastly, we're able to implement these strategies so that they actually work and they actually create learning opportunities where students can learn more stuff. So that's pretty much it right there. It's kind of not so mystical, really. Those are the Power 5, if you want to call them like a Power 5, or the top 5. But obviously, you could add 50 more things to this, right?
Mhm.
Because what about relationship building? What about assessment? What about backward designs and sequencing and pacing at the right time, 45 minutes versus 85 minutes, right? But then people are just going to shut down. It's just too much. So if you can think about how to maybe get in on these top 5, but then also dose these top 5 out in increments, say, hey, let's focus on finding out where students are. Let's do that first. Well, they took this class. Okay, good. So they took a prereq. Well, now we know they know these things, or at least they should. So anyway, these are some helpful things I think that get people feeling more confident faster. Then, by the way, we need you to be a great teacher tomorrow. So that's just a quick follow-up there.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll just keep rolling if we got questions, and
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Wilson.
My issue is how do you go ahead like explaining simple things in class? I feel like I struggle with that, like explaining simple concepts.
Yeah. So I think that's a goal for your deliberate practice. Okay, the goal is I want to explain with more simplicity and more clarity. That is actually the signature of a great teacher, is being able to clearly state in a simple way what exactly I want you to do. And so clarity, simplicity, priority. Those are your key words I want you to think about for your own deliberate practice. So when you start thinking about your assignments, even your materials, are they cluttered? Is it too much? How can you cut it down to the bone on what you really want students to do? And I would actually be quite explicit with it. Say if you've got a PowerPoint slide, I pre-build my groups. So the students are already in groups. And then I explicitly say, do this on the screen. And I try to make it as simple as possible. So it's almost like, here's your group. And then below it says, what are we doing? And below that, it'll say, analyzing this text. And then students still will say, what are we doing? And then I gave them a half sheet of paper with it printed off at their table, because when they go to their groups, they're going to forget what group they're in. But guess what? It's on their table, on their page. You can't lose, man. So you're almost doing this sort of doomsday prepping for clarity. I want maximum clarity. And the next thing you can do is simply ask the students, do you understand what's going on? And they're like, no. And you're like, okay, thanks. Let me help clarify. So if you actively ask, they'll get a relationship with you where they can be free to say, I'm actually kind of confused. You're like, okay, let's get that fixed up. And those are just some quick strategies. So you could actually turn that into deliberate practice if you wanted to. You could say, I want to become more clear and precise in my instructions. Well, how am I going to track that? I'm going to ask at the midpoint of every class, I'm going to pause and ask students, do we understand? What are we taking away so far? And I'm going to track that over, again, say 2 weeks. And now that I've explicitly asked for student input, I'm going to reflect on that data. And I found that 4 out of 10 times students were actually confused, but that's actually pretty good, because 6 out of 10, they knew exactly what I wanted. But what about those 4? Can I take those 4 and really dig in on why they may have gotten off track? And it may not be anything to do with you. It's actually the group they were in that time. And then the next time it was you, because you really weren't as clear as you thought you were. And then if you add in the video component, that's going to take it to the next level. You're actually going to find that you speak too fast. That's your clarity problem. It's not your instructions. It's just you're going so fast that nobody can keep up. I mean, you're just like, okay, guys, now we're going to go to the electrons. And electrons, I was like, oh, electrons, and they circle around, and people are just fried, And if we could just take a breath, right, as Vicky hoped to do, right? So hopefully that's a quick answer there for you, Wilson, there. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Again, it's all about actually practicing something for real, like intentionally setting out to do it. I'm going to run a mile. Okay, great. And I'm going to run it in 10 minutes, because I hadn't run one since high school. So I'm going to go for 10 minutes. And then you track it. You say, I ran 4 miles, 1 a week, and I did a 12, and then I did a 12, and then I did a 10, and then I did a 10. And all of a sudden now I'm moving toward my goal of becoming a runner. That's how the deliberate practice works. We just parlay that right over into teaching. Okay, let's keep going with any other questions we've got. Okay,
I
go
have
ahead,
a, I
Terry.
have a, thanks. A question about writing down your reflection and the importance of, I'll say, a visual, whether it comes to, either writing down what you're going to deliberately practice and or your reflection. What do you see as the power and what's the best way to go about that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways. A lot of folks, they will actually do a journal, a physical journal, which I used to do. And then my life got so hectic, I went to a Word document and I just start banking in my reflections. The other option is the audio note on your phone and just run it down the audio note and then play it back. So those are the quick ways to do it there. If you want to really get fancy with it, you can actually key in your reflections into like a word cloud device and it'll start getting you all your keywords and things, auto transcription devices and things. It'll say like, oh, wow, all I think about is blah. And it came up, 10 times in my reflections across a week period, So those are just some ways there. It's got to just be what works for you. If it becomes cumbersome and if it becomes something that's bogging you down, you probably won't keep doing it. So you've got to do something that really works for you. So find a custom way to do it. For me, my new digital yellow pad on the phone, it's now, it's actually yellow, which is pretty cool. So I was like, oh, I can do this. So I have note upon note. Where I just start clicking new note, and that's my bank. And all I do is I search at the top, and it gets me right to the note that I want. So that's how I do it now. I used to go essentially my trajectory went from yellow pads physically to Word docs on the computer to now yellow pad on my phone. And that's where I do all of my thinking, reflecting now.
Is that what you would also share with your coach, or is that something more just for you as your reflection?
That depends on the relationship with the coach and how open do you want to be. You may actually just bring your reflection with you and kind of rifle through it with your coach, or the coach may want to see the reflection. And they could actually say, oh, here's an area for growth right here. This is what you need to keep doing. This is what you need to start doing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
That relationship is key. Now, I'll tell you what, though, Erickson makes it pretty clear. You will not get to this level of mastery expertise without a coach who's also an expert helping you get there. It is very hard to do this alone, to become a chess master by yourself. I know there was that Netflix show, right, with Queen's Gambit and everything, but she actually had a coach too. If you look at the early episodes down in the boiler room or whatever, but you really do. I thought that was so interesting, is that there has to be someone coaching you along the way, helping you move that goal up, 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 up. It has to constantly move in complexity and challenge. And so that's the challenge, is that you get K-12 schools where they have these terms called instructional coaches, like they're actual positions that's supposed to do this stuff. Well, we don't have that here on a scale that we maybe should have. And so I'm lucky that I work for Dr. Granville, and everything I do, I run by him first. His door is wide open. And then I go and I debrief afterward, because I teach on these long weekends. And I'm like, man, this really tanked. And this part went great, and he's always there to coach me up. And I have no reservations about it. I have no fear about it. And that's a blessing for me, because some people you don't want to open up and be vulnerable with and all that. So I'm going to tell you what, though, the coach is a key component to getting this done. Okay. Thank you, Tara. Go ahead and step out. Anybody else? And we'll get wrapped up here for you.
Hey, Lando, could you talk a little bit more about this coaching concept? Because I hope people have teaching mentors in their departments, but I know that not everyone does. And so how can people go about finding a coach? I think back to early in my career, and I did have a mentor, but later I also just established relationships with my peers and said, hey, this isn't working. Can you come and watch my class, or can I just talk through this with you? So do you have any advice about that?
Yeah, I would actually think about inverting that statement and saying, for the powers that be in the department, in terms of sort of talent management, who do we see as a coach to go get those people the coaching they need, versus seeking out the coach. Whereas especially for new people, I guess you've got people at the ready who are like, hey, this is what I do. Maybe I get a little workload release to go and make this happen, versus it being extra work. which is maybe where people are unlikely to do it. So who on the team now is a great teacher who has the spirit about them to take somebody in and coach them up? And that's actually a great place to start, and I'm already thinking of people, in my hallways here. The catch with a lot of the mentoring is that it actually ends up dealing a little bit less with teaching and a little bit more with navigating the campus, like T&P, faculty dynamics, getting paperwork done. How do you get your travel thing reimbursed? So those are great mentors to have too, right? You need to know that stuff, those like institutional pieces of knowledge. But then on the other hand, we need a coach for how to deliver high quality instruction at every turn. And with that said, we also want to make sure we don't just do that for new folks. We have to encourage people to always wanting to be getting better. That's what we have on that final slide, that mastery is an asymptote, meaning it's that dot on the line, and that graph is it's almost there, and then the dot just keeps moving. So really weird phenomenon in mathematics. So how do we even encourage our seasoned pros to keep getting better? That's tough.
Well, I know we're closing up, but also to think about it from an interdisciplinary perspective, because I think we do tend to gravitate towards our own little buckets of people. And I get a lot out of, sort of processes where I'm working with people from other disciplines. Do a lot, for example, with Christy Julian, which is really odd. She's in interior design. How does that fit with social work? Well, frankly, we're doing some joint projects with classes that do work really well with things like ADA and universal design, and how you design houses that work with certain groups and disabilities. So just a silly example, but I'm just saying, maybe we think about how to develop coaching or mentoring that is bigger than just our department, and the people that we tend to gravitate towards.
And that's where I really think, that interdisciplinary thing comes in with the LTITC. And we had an idea actually this summer about having this notion of the test kitchen. The LTITC is the test kitchen. We come in, we throw the pasta on the wall, right? And there's someone there to say, "Ooh, what if you did it this way?" And you're like, "I don't know. What about this?" And you're like, "Well, what about that?" And it's this free space to just lean into our what ifs about how we could teach or how it went. So it's the test kitchen, but also you come in and you reflect on how it went, So there's some things we could do without a lot of lift, without a lot of money invested. We're not really doing too much to make those interdisciplinary links and helping coach each other. So yeah, maybe there's a faculty learning center on coaching where the whole thing is about training us to be coaches and then splintering us off across the campus. Maybe that could be really cool. People that elect, no, I want to help others get better at teaching. I take passion in it. I'm interested in it. And now I'm going to get in this group of 8 that want to do that too. So that could be a way to actualize this very workshop, across the campus. So, I wouldn't have considered that till you brought that comment up. Vicky, thank you. Well, guys, we are out of time, and I'm so grateful for you as always. And just let me know how I can help. If you need anything, just email me and I'll come running. Okay. Thank you, guys.